How do you build a community of supporters when you're a one-person business, an artist or a solopreneur? Maybe you're just an introvert, but there's a reason why you didn't go work for a larger company. How do you build a following, not just a following, but a community of people that feel like real relationships, that feel like friendships, that feel like supporters, so that you can all help each other grow in your own businesses, in your own journeys? How do you do that? Well, you do that by consistently sharing your story. And a great tool to do that is social media. And luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab. This is episode 186, and today my guest is Cyndi Zaweski. Cyndi is an absolute machine on Instagram. I love her profile so much, and we talked a lot about that. But then once I had her on the show and I learned about her journey in getting here to this point where she understands storytelling and community building in the way that she does, it was absolutely incredible. In fact, we actually revealed some insights that she and I both had for the first time on the show in this conversation itself. And it was so beautiful to learn. She's a journalist from her background. So everything in her career has come back to, in one form or another, engaging with people, asking people questions that allow them to go deeper, that find resonance between people. So therefore, they can have collaboration. It's all the things that we talk about here on the show. We talked about mentors that helped her along the way. We talked about the missteps that she made along the way and the lessons that she learned from that. But it always kept coming back to strengthening the relationships with the people that you aim to serve. And she does it so effectively. But it wasn't a perfect journey. It took her a while to get there, and it took some major missteps and major pivots that she made once she reached this point of burnout. This is why this episode is so important to you. If you are a solopreneur or a small business, or you're an artist and you're trying to get your story out there, because sometimes it's challenging, often it's challenging. So how do you pivot and reset and come back with a stronger sense of community, building a larger following of supporters? That's exactly what we learned in today's conversation. Now, before we get into it, I have a little plug and a question for you all in the audience. I had a microphone issue in this conversation, so I felt I sound off mic, a little echoey. And I'm using Riverside.fm. This is not a plug. This is not a sponsored ad. I'm using Riverside.fm this year. I used to use Restream, and they have a tool called Magic Audio. So when you get to the conversation between Cyndi and myself, I have used that tool. I want to know how you feel like it sounds, because the raw audio, I have put it out before when similar things have happened, but it's not good. It's really echoey. My volume, my gain was really low. So I want to know what you think about it. It's the first time I've used this tool. It's pretty cool. I think it did a pretty good job, but let me know your thoughts. You can reach out and comment on Spotify, or you can shoot me an email at rain@6secondstories.com. Anyways, let's get into it. This is my conversation with Cyndi Zaweski, and I hope that you love it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on the Storytelling Lab. I think, I know a lot of people in the story space, kind of my job, but I think it was Heather Parody that you were on her show that I might have first seen you. She's incredible, by the way, definitely a friend of the show and a friend of mine. But when I saw your stuff, I was immediately just like, oh my God, I loved it so much. I'm envious of the way you approach it in many ways. But I want to kind of get into, I'm always very interested in how people got there, right? Your origin story, if you will. So I'm wondering, first I want to ask you, what was it, not logically or like rationally, but emotionally, like when you're trying to find your purpose and what path you want to take in life, what emotionally drove you, or what was the light bulb that was like, I want to dive deeper and go into the story space?
Well, I've always been a writer, and I've always loved to talk to people, asking questions. I was definitely that kid, I always had like, why this, why that? And I love to talk to people and get their experiences. And as I was growing up, I always knew I wanted to be in writing. And even in high school, I was on the high school newspaper. But I got to college and I was, deciding on a major. And I think I went through like 7 of them in like the first year because I was like, oh, there's so many things I want to do. And I ended up in public relations, and that was going to be my track. So my freshman year in college, I'm there for public relations, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a job. I'll be able to make money. I'll be able to talk to people, and I'll be able to write. And it's okay. It's not lighting me up or anything, but I like it enough. And to complete this track, I get into this broadcast journalism class with my professor. There's this professor, and he was so different than anyone I've ever met. He was really able to tell a story and make it dynamic and interesting. And the way that he taught us storytelling just made me believe that I could do so much more with the way I was writing and the way I was talking to people, and how telling stories can really change lives and impact people and have this incredible ripple effect. So when I was there and I realized that there's so much more to writing than just communication, there's a way to make people feel, there's a way to influence causes you care about, and champion things and share messages that people can really relate to and feel seen and heard. And from there, I was hooked. I loved telling all different types of stories from there. And that's how my whole journey started. And I was in broadcast journalism for a really long time. And I worked in newspapers, and I worked on podcasts, and I worked as a magazine editor. So I've kind of done it all in the publishing world besides radio.
And in the journalism world, did you find that thing when you were talking about public relations, when you're studying and you're like, it was okay, it didn't really, I don't know what words you used, but basically it didn't like light your heart on fire or something like that. Those are my words, not yours. Did you feel that thing, that spark with the journalism?
Yeah, like that. What really was the difference there of being able to tell real people's stories and ask good questions, and not necessarily going in with in public relations, you already know the message, right? Like, what you're trying to say. In journalism, you go in with an open mind and you're curious and you're asking questions. And sometimes you find this story as you're talking to somebody that is so much more than you would ever anticipate walking in. So there's that moment in journalism where you're like, wow, like you've really cut to the heart of something, and it's so much more profound than anything that you could do with a canned answer and a canned message.
That's such a great point. And I don't think anyone's, and I've had plenty of PR people on the show, it's still storytelling. And a lot of the people that we serve need to get their message out there to the media. But I've never thought about it like that, how canned it is, and the stories are almost already scripted. As a documentary filmmaker, it's the same thing. And that like, you start with a general direction, but it really just takes you on the ride it's going to. Unless you're doing one like Ken Burns, where you're doing like the Civil War and you really script it out, get these interviews. But my style is kind of fly on the wall style. I love that. You're like, co-finding the story with the person. So it's like a reveal for you. That's super exciting. And it's a little bit more the magic of storytelling.
Yeah, that's exactly what I love about it. And that's what I love doing for business owners now, like, because I am in marketing now. I actually ended up going back to school. I went to Columbia. I got a certification in digital marketing because being able to share stories online was something that in my journalism days, I really tuned into, because when I was working in newsrooms in 2012 or something, none of the people who were in the newsrooms cared about social media. They were like, oh yeah, just like go post your thing online. All right. But when I just had this free reign, like they were just like, yeah, you could do whatever you want. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to just try this. I'm going to see what I could do. And I would post stories, but I would also post questions, and I would get feedback from people online. And then I could make a different story or hit it from a new angle. And I really got this whole appreciation of like creating stories with people and like sharing their stories and telling those stories and also being able to get them the information they need. And it is like this co-creation of a story. And that's always what I loved about it, because it really is bringing out things in people that they don't even realize about themselves. Like you could really, when you're helping somebody tell their story, whether it's like a business or just like the mom who's running a bake sale. I did a lot of community journalism too. When you could talk to people and really help them see like the bigger meaning in what they're doing, like their eyes light up. And it's so incredible to be able to tell those stories and really see the look on people's faces when they're like, oh, wow, like what I'm doing is so much more than me.
Absolutely. And in a way, that's what do you remember the professor's name, by the way?
Dr. Dana Rosengard.
Rosengard. Shout out to Dr. Rosengard. And I love shout out to all teachers and professors and lecturers, but there's often those handful, one or two, that really leave their hooks in you. I've got a few from my education in college as well that like you just always remember they had that impact on your life. And it sounds like they did exactly that same thing for you, kind of like through their storytelling, opened up your eyes to like what you were really passionate about, at least indirectly, right? They showed you opportunities. Is there any about like, to me, when we think about storytelling, that's kind of like the mentor role, right? The guide, someone that comes along and helps you, gives you these gifts, teaches you these things. Is there anyone else in your more recent life that you attribute a lot of your learnings or success to? Anybody that's helped guide you or help elevate you from one level to the next?
Yeah, there's a guy, his name is Sun Yi.
Been on the show, absolutely.
Oh, has he been on the show?
Yes,
he is my mentor. He's my current mentor.
That's amazing. Sorry to interrupt you. I just got excited, but I love all these organic connections. But yes, he's amazing. Sun Yi is amazing. How did that happen?
So I joined his membership, his Night Owl, and that was about 2 years ago. I learned so much from him. I love learning from him. And I'm always looking to elevate my craft. So I think that constantly like putting myself with people like that, with those guys, with those mentors is so important, like to keep developing. And I learned so much from him. And then this year he was doing one-on-one mentorships for, I think, only the second time. And I was like, wow, this is a great opportunity. So I got involved with him. And yeah, it's been incredible to learn from him and hone my skills with him.
Absolutely. We'll probably come back to that. I'm so glad I asked that question. But yeah, he's incredible. And everyone listening, it was the beginning of last season, season 12, I believe. I forget which episode, but incredible. Even just his Instagram feed is super valuable. Which actually leads me to my next point. I feel like yours is absolutely as well. And you had already mentioned experimenting with social media when you were in your journalism career, which I love that free reign. It really gives you the room to test and learn, right? Instead of probably a few years later, it was like, do this and only do this strategy to people like you. So I think that's really cool. They gave you the autonomy to kind of like fail and learn and make mistakes and experiments and play around with it. What are some of the early lessons that you learned leveraging social media and storytelling that were really effective in terms of like conjuring engagement and interaction?
So what I loved about it was that I could go and report a story. I can put it on our website and I could post it on Facebook. And within an hour or two, I would get all these comments like, oh, like, because if we're reporting on something like, somebody won an award or something for argument's sake, right? Then other people are commenting underneath that, like, oh, yeah, I remember him from high school or blah, 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 blah. And like, you could start pulling the threads, right? And like, you start to connect some pieces. People will comment like different angles, like, have you talked to this person? Or I remember back when like this happened. And all of a sudden, like, it's different ways to add different color and new perspective into story, because so much of good storytelling, and especially like when you're doing it on the news where you have, a noon show and a 5:30 show and an 11 show, right? I was working in small newsrooms. There wasn't a ton of breaking news, right? The ability to be able to tell a story from multiple different angles was extremely important. So having the social media feedback that way was really great, but it also built trust. It built trust between me and the people in the community. So when I would show up, or when I was doing a story, people knew that it was okay to talk to me, and we had this rapport and we could be honest with each other. So using social media to build rapport and to improve content is something that I've done since Facebook came out, pretty much.
That's incredible. I want to kind of stay in the topic of social media, if that's okay, for a little while. I think you do it really well, or use it really well, and I have some questions I kind of want to chip away at. I'm glad you brought up Sunny, because one of the questions we can kind of bring him into the fold. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've mostly been a visual storyteller. Not only, I'm a writer as well, especially more so in recent years. And there's kind of a current, it's not really a debate, but most of the people that I look up to and listen to, like Sun, like other creators like that, have kind of moved away from focusing on the really branded grid, right? I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and there's a creator, Todd Collins, who mentions that like rarely anybody's just going through, at least on that platform, and scrolling your grid. And we kind of have this thing from previous years where we want it to match and look good and yada, yada, yada. So I'm trying to listen to them, because if the content's good, the content's good. And even Sun said something about this the other day, and someone tried to push back in the comments. They're like, yeah, but your grid looks like it's very much branded. And he said he doesn't focus on that. What I see in yours, I just can't help but really love it, because, it's clearly your brand in terms of color scheme, et cetera, in terms of the style. Where do you fall on that? It's clearly important to you. Do you not really worry about it? Do you just do it because it makes it easier? Because it's like, here's the template I set? Because it's very hard for me to divorce myself from like the look of it. Like when I look at my grid, it's really hard to just see a bunch of random images. It's hard for me. And I hear a lot of people saying it doesn't really matter that much. And then I see someone like you where it seems like it does matter, and you do it really well. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not overly obsessed about it, but I see where you're coming from. Like, I do think that there's value in having it look good. And I also, like, I just want to enjoy my feed. Like, I like to enjoy I like to enjoy the content I'm creating. I create content that I enjoy. And I also, I take pride in it. I like the way it looks. I'm not perfect by any means, and you'll see, because I have different color schemes, and you'll see it doesn't always follow a format. But, for me, it also helps because because of the way I plan my content. So like, I'll do like an educational post that kind of talks about like the context of storytelling, in the sense of like, what is storytelling and what can it do for your brand, and what are some tactical things you could do? So that's my Monday anchor, and that's usually a green post. And then I do like a practice what you preach. Like of course I tell stories too. So like, that's usually something that I'll post on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And then I'll do like a solid pink post. And I talk a lot about in storytelling, like we think of, so there's brand narrative, and then there are brand stories, right? So the and if you think of Christmas lights, this is like a good way to think about it, where like the string that runs through is the narrative, and then the stories are the lights, like the things that like brighten things up, right? So a part of creating a narrative where like all those little stories make sense, right? And we're not just kind of telling stories into social media just for engagement, but they really go back to reinforce the brand. A big part of building a strong brand narrative is a shared identity with your audience. Like, what kind of things do you value together? What kind of struggles are you overcoming together? So that's where a lot of like those pink posts will come in, and they'll be like, they're more values driven posts, values driven stories. They bring the community together and remind us, like, why we're here. And it's not all about getting likes on Instagram, but rather having the ripple effect when we tell our story, and being brave enough to share our stories online, and why that matters beyond transactions. So the color coordination like also helps me keep my themes.
No, I think it's perfect. I mean, I totally love what you said about like, this is what makes me happy. Right. And that's Oh, perfectly acceptable, as well as it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not logistic, but like it helps you in your execution of it all. And it's not like you're sitting there like it has to be like this because of how I have to present myself. It's actually helping you produce consistently. So that makes a lot of sense, and it helps me. I know. So I follow you on Instagram. Is that the main or only channel that or platform that you use? Or are you on other places as well?
So I do Instagram, I do Threads, and Pinterest. I have not gotten on TikTok yet, but video is something that I'm looking to get back into. It's a big part of my background, being in broadcast journalism, and I would love to bring that kind of style to my storytelling. So that's something that I'm looking forward to doing this year, definitely by the summer.
Nice. Uh, um, so speaking of Instagram, I see a lot of the posts that you do that are really effective or carousel posts. Um, why do you think that those are so effective? Is it just because that's what Instagram is pushing in the algorithm, or do people receive those and ingest the information within them easier for some reason?
My carousel posts have always done really well. And I think one of the secrets to doing this is information or insights over information, right? So I used to do these carousels and they did well too, don't get me wrong, but they had lots and lots and lots of information in it. And over the years and as like I've gotten better at it, they're really refined now. So there's like maybe 3 sentences, like 4 sentences max per slide. So it's just really easy to digest and you're just kind of getting these quick hits. And that's why like the short form storytelling is such like an art, right? So like being able to tell stories in like 7, 10 sentences, but like that's what keeps people engaged. And I find that carousels are engaging because people physically have to move their thumb to make it happen. And there's psychological reasons for it, but once they've made that investment where they've swiped, they will likely continue swiping. And then once they finish swiping, they will likely like it. And if they really like it, then they'll comment. But yeah, it is a way to keep people like physically engaged with the content as well.
And are you using it as top of funnel when you're trying to drive people towards a certain action, or are you using it more like brand awareness and just kind of putting the content out there?
So most of the time it's, well, I don't want to say most of the time, but like at least, so I post about 4 times a week. So like two of those pieces are going to be the call to action is going to be a newsletter, and I'll use ManyChat to get people onto the newsletter. So usually what I'm doing, my newsletter comes out on Thursday, for example. So like the Monday, Wednesday post, they're going to promote the newsletter that comes out on Thursday. It'll be some sort of tease. And then the other ones are more like awareness. Like it's very rare that I'll sell on grid.
Yeah, got you. Um, Zooming back out a little bit to talk more about storytelling, what's one of the common things? Well, what do you think more people should know or maybe miss in terms of storytelling? What's a common mistake that you just see over and over and over again?
I think that probably the most common thing is like my stories are boring. I don't have any stories. I'm not good at storytelling. I really try to encourage people to get that out of their head. And like so much of my message is like anybody can get better at storytelling. It's a skill set. I feel like people like they get really overwhelmed by it, or they think it has to be super fancy, or that it's hard to do. And I try to remind people that storytelling is actually something we do all the time. It's just you know, a natural byproduct of being human. So I try to make people feel more comfortable with that. And then the biggest thing that I'll tell people is that if you have change, you could create a story. So I think trying to move people from like, what is an anecdote to what is a story to how long does a story have to be, and talking about the change in the story and using contrast to make that change really clear. And then being able to do context and, like a moral of the story, although I'm not like a super hard, like you need to teach a lesson in this story. I really like it when people like find their own lesson. If you tell it well, that people should be able to find their own meaning. But teaching people that like everything centers around this change, and it's that's why I'm a big fan of frameworks and templates and things like that, because I do think they're like training wheels, and I think it gets people over that initial hump of, I don't have any stories, this is boring, I don't know how to do it. Like, I just kind of want to take away all those excuses and like just get people doing it, because it is a practice, and the more we do it, the better we get at it.
Absolutely. What are some of the frameworks that you like to talk about?
So I have a whole bunch of them, but the one that I talk about the most is my 2-sentence story framework. And that is the one that highlights the change. So basically what I want to know is old me, new me, or my industry used to be this way, my industry is this way now. Like, I want to see those sharp changes, those super contrasts. So like a secret to this is like, how do you know if you have a story? You know a story if you could say, this is the old me and this is the new me. If there's no change in you, then there's no story, then nothing has changed. Sun actually gives a really good example of this. And he says, when I was when I was a kid, I was an outcast, and and then I grew up and I met a whole bunch of friends, and like the moral of that story was supposed to be, stay true to yourself and you find your tribe, but you didn't actually change. So that's not a story, that's an anecdote. And like, knowing that is actually the key to being able to tell really good story. So that's why I like this 2-sentence thing, because it really gets people focused on what they need to tell the story, this shift, this change, and then we could build context around it and add in meaning, and then we could work on the writing. But getting to that heart of the story, getting to the shift, the transformation, and having that like clearly spelled out, that is the most helpful way to start storytelling, just knowing what that change is.
Absolutely. Have you noticed are there certain types of content that you create that always seem to resonate and garner engagement from folks? Is there a certain type of content you create that always seems to work, for lack of a better word?
Well, definitely the storytelling tips always seem to work. People do, what it is about those storytelling tips, though? They have really good examples. Examples always do really well. I think if you could put an example on something, then your content will just be 10 times better, because you've added a good example. People can really relate to that. But I always think that my plot twist stories do the best. Like when you bring people thinking one thing and then you change it and you give a lesson. And I think that those are the ones that always get the best reaction. That's delights people the most, for sure.
Absolutely. I've experienced that in my own content. My background is in film, and so I can't help but a lot of my examples be movies. Anytime I'm creating something and I say like this film, and even for good or bad, like if people disagree with me, if or if they have another movie they think fits it better or whatever, yeah, I completely agree from my experience. When you give examples, that tends to get them engaged. And also what you said earlier, you were talking about your early days in journalism, asking questions, but it sounded like you still kind of do that, like offering chances for any of your audience to give their opinion. I think helps, and that you're probably really good at that because of your background in interviewing people and asking questions. How much does empathy and connection, you just said the word relatable, or people relate to it, how much do those things weigh when you're trying to build an audience through storytelling? How much is it about making the audience feel understood or seen or heard?
I think that is really the crutch of building a community, not just building like these, like getting a whole bunch of followers or whatever. That's one thing, right? But building a community of people who are interested in your work, with you for the long haul, communities are built on these commonalities. That's why when I was talking about my posts before, like why I do something about shared identity and like what our common struggles are and what our common aspirations are, that's a huge part of being able to tell the right stories, right? These universal themes that we could tap into that are just really specific to our audience. It doesn't have to be a one-for-one experience. Like they don't have to have the same exact experience that I do. But when we relate on an emotional level, it's much easier to bond with people and keep engagement high, right? Like if resonance is, those creators that you'll just stop your scroll for, like it doesn't matter what it is. So that's what you're creating when you have resonance. That's the feeling of, oh, this person like has something good in store for me. I get this person gets me. I care about what they have to say. That's relatability. And that is, it's a hallmark for building authority. When you relate to something, you trust it. And that is, it's kind of like, most people think authority is like, I need to post these tips and tricks and I need to show that I need to prove myself and I need to show them. But when you're relatable and you say something true that's true for them in their life, they believe you, because why wouldn't they? You're speaking truth about their life and all of a sudden you've kind of related on this different level, but they believe you. So it's a gateway to building trust and building a community around, the things that you care about and not just tips and tricks.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about your background with journalism and what you learned in terms of that. In terms of asking questions and finding ways to connect with people a little bit deeper, being able to go a little bit further, what are some tips that you might have or that you've learned along the way that make one a better interviewer or have the ability to ask better questions if they're talking to their viewer?
So one of my favorite questions to ask is, what made you do that? Or what were you thinking when? Those are like, to me, that's a gateway question, because when, usually we'll go into an interview, and I do this now with clients when we're trying to tell brand stories, right? We talk about their origin and, like, why is this product important to you? And then we'll go deeper, like, asking, like, how were you, like, what were like everything going through your mind, like when you made that decision, and do you like, and like, were you worried about the consequences of the decision? Like trying to get into their head a little bit so you kind of hear their thought process, not just why they made the decision, but what they were thinking was going to happen when they made the decision versus what actually happened when they made the decision, and kind of like pulling those threads a little bit. So, and that's really helpful for a storyteller too, because that's going to help you really set the scene. And when we were talking about plot twists, right? Like, what did you think was going to happen versus what actually happened? Like those are little ways that you could start finding those plot twists in real life. And because I'm a journalist, I really do strongly believe in real life storytelling, not just like kind of like fictional ones that we make up to tell a message. I do think there's a place for it, but you get more emotional connection and you get really all the benefits of storytelling when you're telling real life stories. So pulling out those threads and like really trying to get into people's heads about their decisions and how are they feeling and their expectations and all of those things really helps make a story arc.
Absolutely. When you were going back to the community that you were building, when you're building that community of people that you serve, do you have a clear hypothesis or stance on storytelling that drove you towards a certain demographic or the people that you serve? Like, do you understand what I'm asking? Like, what is your perspective or your angle in storytelling? How did that identify like who you should help with that, I guess?
So for me, it's all about shared identity, because I want to talk, like, I can only talk about the things I know, right? Like, so when I tell stories about burnout, when I tell stories about overcoming anxiety, when I tell stories about overcoming a fixed mindset and getting into growth and like really establishing what success looks like for me, all of the, like, when I tell those stories, those are the people that I'm attracting into my community, people who are feeling those same things. They're thinking, you get me, I've been there too. And that not only makes the stories resonate and brings the right people into my community, people who I could really help, right? By, like, if I share my stories of like, yeah, I went through this and it was really hard, but now I could help you along the way. Like, that's like, I know I could help the right people because I'm just talking about things that I know about. And then not only that, but like when you're talking about your experiences, you're helping those people feel seen, because likely when you're telling a story, because you have to have that transformation, right? Something has to shift. So you're not in the beginning, but they might be in the beginning. And now they're feeling less alone. And now we can have conversations in the comments. And again, this is the reason why my engagement stays high. And there are people who have been in my community. I started my account almost 5 years ago, and there are people from 5 years ago that are still in my community today, that still buy from me, that still come to my workshops, that still email me, that still, they share their stories with me. Like, we've been on this journey together now for 5 years, and I've seen them grow and they've seen me grow. And I think that that's like the real beauty of being able to have a strategy that with those shared identities. So like knowing what you've gone through, what makes you you, like what are your values. I know we talk a lot about that in Brand Story, like what's your values, what do you stand for? And it's kind of like, it's more than transactional. Like, it's really about being able to find people and showing up for your people and carving out your own little corner of the internet and making it what you want it to be. It's a part of enjoying the process. To me, it's more than just a means to an end. It's that is enjoying the process, being able to share the journey with people who really care.
Absolutely. I love that. Earlier, one of my favorite things that you said in this conversation is the Christmas lights metaphor about the brand narrative. It's so good and obviously so visual. Do you help people, or what would your advice be to those brands that maybe have a loose narrative or don't have a narrative at all, that are trying to find that brand identity that might inform those little stories, the little lights that hang from that string? How do you help people find that thing that they stand for, as you say?
So that is the first thing I do with clients. Like, even before we're telling little stories, we really want this backbone. And because that's going to help us do everything else right. So when we're there and we're starting, I really do put my journalism hat on, and I'm asking, well, why, again, like, why do you do certain things that you do? And that's what tells me like what your values are. When I started doing this and doing content strategy for brands, I would, like, what are your values? And people would just look at me like, sure, kindness, like being a good person, compassion. Right. And it's like, okay. So really what helped me there was figuring out like, okay, so like, why do you do the things you do? Like, I'll ask them things like, okay, like on your last client call or the last time you worked with a project, like what was the most difficult thing that happened and how did you overcome it? Like, oh, okay, so that shows me that you really care about doing things the right way the first time, even if it takes longer. So you would rather, blow your deadline and get it right than rush something and have it be so-so. So that says something about you. Okay, so that's something that is going to go into our brand narrative. And depending on how bold you want to be, or you could even say like, don't expect my work to be on time, because I care so much about getting this right for you that it might take a couple extra days to nail it, but it's always going to be worth it for you. And that's the kind of business owner I am. Like, okay, like now we have a story, now we have some background, now we have some meat into the, I care about doing a really good job for my clients. And that's what the difference is.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple of personal questions. I wonder if, while building this community, building this business, is there anything that, let me just establish this first. Any of us like solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, there's always gives and takes and sacrifices to pursue these things we're trying to build, right? Is there any part of your life or your passions, things that you wanted to do, that you've had to either compromise or sacrifice in order to pursue this particular path?
Yes, especially in the beginning. So I had really lucked out when I started my business. I started my business during the pandemic, and I was the executive editor of a lifestyles magazine here in New York. And basically the press just stopped. Like, we weren't doing any luxury content during a pandemic. So I was just at home, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to start my freelance writing career. I was like, I'm going to be on Medium. I'm going to just write from the heart. And I really thought that I was going to strike out on my own and kind of have this like freelance writing, freelance journalism career. And soon enough, all the business owners that I used to write stories about for the magazines or for the newspapers, they were like, I don't have any way to get in touch with my clients anymore. They can't come in person. I need an online presence. Can you help me write social media posts? Can you help me write website copy? Can you help me get me in front of my clients now that they can't come to my storefront anymore? So I had a whole bunch of new clients, like before I even had a business. And it grew so fast from there. I started sharing my journey on Instagram. My Instagram grew pretty fast. And before I knew it, I was 3 years in. I had 3 employees. I had a multiple 6-figure content agency. Like, this was like literally like 0 to like 1,000 in 3 years. I barely had a chance to look up, and I sacrificed a lot for that. Like, not only my dream of like, oh, I'm going to be a writer and a storyteller, like a solopreneur. And also, my health. I was managing people and managing clients and still trying to, have a balanced life with my family. But I was working so much, and I realized, like, really at the beginning of last year, like, this isn't the direction I want to go. Like, this is like the epitome of everything looks great on paper, because I was feeling so sick. And I never, like, at one point I would write 10 stories a day, like running around doing all sorts of stuff as a journalist and as a reporter and an editor. And I never burnt out, but I burnt out really bad at the beginning of last year. And I had to reevaluate. And I was like, listen, like, I'm so excited about the growth of my business. It's such a beautiful thing, but running a content agency is not what I want to do. I really want to be writing. I really want to be, working one-on-one with business owners. I want to be teaching storytelling, and like, I really want to be doing my own writing, which I felt like got sacrificed a lot, and my health got sacrificed a lot. So, learning, like, I had to learn all over of how to rest, how to take care of myself, and really go on this spiritual and healing journey to come back to who I was. And that's been the process over the last year. And going back to communities are built on commonalities, and how do you know what stories to post? Well, when I started posting about my pivot story, the reaction was just overwhelming. Like, so many people are doing this. Like, they're starting businesses and they're looking online and they're seeing like 10K months, group programs. This is the way, that's the way. And they're running themselves in circles. They don't really know what they want. They're just trying to get to success, and they're building businesses that they don't like. So many people have come to me and said, I built something and I don't want to give it up because I just spent all this time doing it, but I don't like it. Like, I'm scared. How do you do it? So again, like being true to yourself, being true to your journey and sharing your journey, you're finding these people. So like, I know I could really help this person who's like pivoting, did not like their business, wants to use story to kind of shift the narrative and change the way that they're showing up online and find the right people. So I've been working with a lot of those types of people this year, which has just been a truly fortunate side effect of being able to tell my story.
Well, I'm so glad that I asked that, because I wasn't exactly sure where we were going to go with that question. It's just something that I've been thinking about since we've been talking, but amazing story, amazing answer to that. Because what I find is like people like us that have a craft, but they're also trying to build a business, pay the bills, etc. Often they can be, at odds against each other, and we can sacrifice that craft. And that's a shame, right? Because a lot of people end up as some of your clients did, where it's like, I have this business, I don't want to let it go, but like, I don't like it. It's a terrible position to be in when you have a calling in your heart, right? Something you feel like you want to do. So do you feel like now that you've found this kind of happy medium between this thing, writing, that you've always been passionate about, and also being able to build a community and a sustainable business?
I feel like this is the best that it's been in a long time. Like, it's all coming together, and I really don't believe in rushing the process. I'm really trusting myself this time. Because I rushed so much in the past, where I was just a yes person. Like, I was saying yes to everything and accommodating everyone and building a big business. And that was great. But now I'm slowing down and I'm taking my time, and I'm really building exactly what I want. And like you said, like, it's not about sacrificing the craft. Now, every single morning, I have 2 hours to write. I'm writing for 2 hours every morning. And that's such a gift for me, because that makes me a better business owner, but it also makes me a better wife and a better friend, because I'm doing the thing that I'm here to do. And that's what is most important for me. Like, I love my business and I love my community, but I also love my real life and like the things I have in it. So being like a whole person, like, that's like the greatest gift.
So beautiful. I love that so much. What do you say to someone? There's a kind of a conversation happening now. I see a lot of actors talking about it, and I think it's justified, because a lot of producers are hiring people just based off of their followings, for example. And a lot of people, not just actors, artists in general, are like, I just want to make my stuff. Like, I just want to do the things that I love to do. In your case, writing. In my case, filmmaking. What is the point, like, not the point, but why is building a community, building an audience important for those people who are crafts people, who have, these artistic endeavors they're passionate about and they want to pursue? You've given a great example of where, okay, maybe you've also given an example of when it looks, when you're going about it the wrong way, right? Perhaps, and it might lead to burnout, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe not for everybody, but you seem to be showing us a really clear example now of being able to, I don't know, scratch both itches. I don't know how to word that. Like, fulfill your head and your heart, right? Or pay your bills and live out your purpose. To those people who might be like, what's the point? Like, I don't want to have to do that. What do you say to them? Is it important to build a community of supporters, a community through commonalities, as you say, for those types
I truly feel like that has been the gift. Like, because, I could go to I had more than 50,000 followers on Instagram when I was like, hey, listen, I'm burnt out. I'm taking 2 months off and I'm going to go figure it out. And, I'll be back when I do. And they stuck with me the whole time. But having a community, that is really what's going to carry you through. There's like you probably know 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. Like, being able to have people that just kind of stick with you, who know your name, who respect you, who love learning from you, who are just interested in keeping up with you because you help them and you share things that you share stories about your life that closely match theirs. And you also have helpful products, and you also have great offers that like help them get to the next level, right? But having those people in the community, like, that's what makes the difference. And I think you could tell like there are some accounts where like they'll blow up for a little while and then they'll just like their engagement will dip, right? Like they stop. So like a lot of that is like you're blowing up because you're just posting tips and tricks. No one knows you. They just know that like, okay, those are your tips and tricks. Well, then like, I don't know, like a year later, somebody new comes along and they've got some tips and tricks too. And then, you never really form that bond with people. So it's great to go viral, but that's why having that storytelling element, having commonalities, having things that you care about beyond the tips and tricks, beyond the transaction, that's what keeps people with you. And, it's a two-way street, right? Like I know people's dogs' names. I know their kids' names. Like it's community because I care back. And a part of having a part of having a community, a part of building a community means you are the first community member. Like you are the first member of the club and you are inviting people into your club. So that's that through line of like building for me, but creating for you. And that's how I married the two.
Is that the first time you said that?
That is the first time I said that.
Building for me, but creating for you is so sick. Like that's so good. I totally get it. It's very motivating and inspiring. And I love that. I just got a little emotional. I love that you could leave for 2 months and they were so supportive. They're like, yeah, it's okay, fam. We'll be here. So like,
I didn't expect it. I was like, when I walked away, I was like, okay, well, this is it. Like, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say like, these people are going to stick around for me. I have no idea what's going on. Like I walked away knowing that I could potentially not come back, but it did in a huge way. And again, like that was just being vulnerable, being honest, just saying the journey. And again, but it's not all or nothing. Like I do post tips and tricks. Like I do post the helpful content. I do have the helpful offers. There is the transactional side, but there's also the side of like, we are in this together and we're all here to become better storytellers. We're all here to push past those things in our life holding us back and get to a better life. And like, that's why we're in community together. It's beyond just the tips and tricks.
Totally. And that's clearly the theme of today's conversation. It's just relationships. And that's what's kind of like been your fuel your whole career. And when you just said that piece, it reminded me of something my mom used to say. She was well known all over the community and still is, but she was a substitute teacher. She was always in the school system. And she was like the teacher, the substitute that would take the maternity leaves, like not just hand out worksheets one day, but like she could really teach. She should have been a teacher. And the students loved her so much because she would love them up and have fun with them and joke with them. But when it was time to work, it was time to work. And so, like you said, it's not one or the other. It's a little bit of both. And it just reminded me of that when you were talking about like, yeah, you've built a relationship with these people. So you can do the commonality, the shared experiences, shared emotions thing. And then sometimes you can get to work and say, okay, here's how you're going to tell a better story today. And I love that so much. And that doesn't exist if you didn't have the foundation of the relationship with the community. They do go away after 2 months if you don't have that. So it says a lot about the work you put into to intentionally establish that bond. So much respect.
I think it is like a huge part of it. If you really want to carve out your corner of the internet, you got to be. One of like the craziest things that people DM me is like, because people will just DM me and they'll just be like, I like your content. And I'm like, and I'll just say, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And people are like, wow, you responded. Like, I was like, what do you mean? I finally asked somebody, like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, people with big accounts don't answer. And I was like, oh, like, that's wild to me because like these people are taking time out of their day. They're learning. They're excited. Like, I don't get that.
I can attest to that. Your response to me, now granted, we knew some of the same people and this is what I do. So I'm pretty effective at getting in touch with people. But no, your first response to me was so pleasant and you were so excited. It wasn't just like, sure, or anything. Yeah. I mean, I noticed that immediately about you and it feels comforting. It's like, oh, great. Like she's excited to be here. Yeah, 100%. I think that's a big part of why you're successful. But it's clearly something that you're intentionally doing as far as I see. And it's because you've known all along that connection with people is what opens up the door for collaboration. So one last question before we go. You mentioned earlier that kind of in the short term this year, your goal is to maybe do more short form video. Where I'm wondering what's kind of your ultimate goal? Like where do you see yourself driving all of this?
My gosh. So I actually have a lot of exciting things coming up this year because last year was the pivot year. So basically just kind of like ripping down foundations, kind of putting foundations back in. But this year I'm working on a lot of like really interesting offers. Like I really want to just do more like workshops and live teaching and opportunities where we can get the community together and people could share their stories and we could workshop together. So that's the first half of the year. That's what I'm working on, really creating spaces that we can come together and practice storytelling. So that's definitely something that's coming up. And I would absolutely love to do video in the next half of the year. Writing a book is something that's on my priority list, mostly because like I was mentioning earlier, I do love to study storytelling. No matter how much I know about it, I still feel like I could read more. And especially for brand storytelling, there's a lot out there for companies and but like brand storytelling for companies and I guess even a little personal brand storytelling, but none of it translates, not the way that I'm doing it. So I thought a book would be helpful to talk about these things, about commonalities and, being able to find the stories like that are going to work for somebody like us, somebody who's like an artist, somebody who cares about their craft, somebody who isn't just a business or a personal brand trying to get a reputation, but somebody who really is the artist behind the brand. So that's something that I'm really interested in and I've started doing. So I'm hoping to do that, but definitely like my primary goal this year is to create spaces where people can tell stories together and get feedback and improve.
That. Well, if you need any early readers, I nominate myself. That sounds awesome. And I think that's an incredible audience. You should absolutely go for. By the way, did you finish Storyworthy?
I did.
So good.
I just finished it like literally this morning.
It's so good. Like I read a lot of storytelling books too, but Matthew Dix, he's also been on the show. He's great. If you haven't connected with him, he's like you. He's very easy to approach, responds immediately. Incredible guy. But yeah, I loved that book.
Yeah, he's like an idol of mine from a distance. I would love to meet him one day.
Oh yeah, I mean, just reach out. Honestly, he's super approachable. This is a case where, it's okay to meet your heroes with this guy. He's super, super sweet. I love him to death. And I haven't seen anybody that he's never not opened up to. It's when you find us who love story, I think like we're all, maybe it's like this with any passion, right? But we're all passionate about the same thing. So I don't see a lot of that kind of competitiveness or like closed doors, right? We're all here to share the love of story. That sounds super cheesy, but I find it to be true.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that people who are really in it for the love of it, like we're all just like so happy to see each other succeed because I think we all know on some level that telling a good story like really means like digging up the stuff in your soul and sorting through it and like making meaning out of chaos. And I think that's like such a beautiful alchemy that you have to go through to tell like really vulnerable stories. So there's just a lot of respect there.
That's a great observation. I totally agree. And a great place for us to end today's conversation. Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you for having me.
Good luck with everything. We'll see you soon. My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab.